All right, thanks very much. I suspect some more senators will come trickling in. Now, let me start off by just making a few brief points about where we are today and how we got to where we are. This government shutdown is taking place for one simple reason. For the first time in the modern history of our country, the majority party in the Senate, the Republican Party, which needs 60 votes to pass a budget bill to fund the government, is refusing to negotiate. Republicans have 53 votes in the Senate. Democratic caucus has 47. You need 60 votes to pass a budget bill. You have to negotiate. But for the first time in modern history, the Republicans are not negotiating. What they are saying is their way or the highway. They refuse to sit down and talk. And further, in terms of their contempt for the negotiating process, Mike Johnson, the Republican leader in the House, has given his members a 6-week paid vacation. So here we are in the middle of a government shutdown. Workers are not getting paid. People are worried about escalating health care costs. People are being worried about being thrown off the health care they have. And the Republicans in the House are saying, hey, guys, take a 6-week paid vacation. You don't have to be here in Washington, D.C. To me, that is pretty insane. And let me be clear what it would mean if Republicans got their way and this so-called CR, continuing resolution, were to pass. First, it would throw 15 million Americans off the health care they have because of massive cuts to Medicaid and the ACA. And what studies from Yale and the University of Pennsylvania and elsewhere indicate that when you throw 15 million working class and low-income people off the health care they have, 50,000 of them will die unnecessarily every year. So what this legislation is about is whether we vote to allow 50,000 of our fellow Americans to die unnecessarily every year because they were thrown off of Medicaid and the ACA. Further, if the Republicans were to prevail, what it means is that on average, health insurance premiums for the 20 million plus people on the Affordable Care Act on average would double. In my state of Vermont, we have now received information there are some people who would pay a tripling or a quadrupling of their health care premiums when Americans are already paying the highest prices in the world for health care. People cannot afford a doubling or a tripling in their health care premiums. And now what brings us here today, in an absolutely unbelievable way, President Trump is refusing to release the $5 billion in emergency funding for SNAP that helps feed 16 million kids, and that is a direct violation of the law. He is prepared to let millions and millions of children and their parents and grandchildren go hungry because he sees maybe there is a political gain in that. Let there be no mistake, and that is what this statement is about. This is on the U.S. Department of Agriculture website until very recently. The president is legally obligated to use this emergency fund, and up until last week, his administration was preparing to do that. We are here today to send a very loud and a very clear message to President Trump. Obey the law. I know that's a hard concept for the president, but obey the law. Do what Congress mandated you do. Do not let children in America and their parents and grandchildren go hungry. Do not go down as the first president in history to manufacture a hunger crisis in the richest country on earth. Release these funds. Now, the good news is there are at least 11 Republicans in the Senate who are supporting a bipartisan bill to ensure that no one in America goes without the nutrition assistance they need during the shutdown. And that is very good news, and I thank those 11 Republicans. Every Democrat supports that bill as well. That bill, I say to Senator Thune, when you have 11 Republicans and every member of the Democratic caucus on support, that bill should get to the floor immediately. No child in this country should be forced to go hungry. With that, let me introduce Senator Merkley.
Thank you. So the President of the United States has a new MAGA agenda. Instead of Make America Healthy Again, it's the Make America Hungry agenda. It's weaponizing food, using food as a weapon against America's most vulnerable families. In my state of Oregon, you're talking about 210,000 children. You're talking about 130,000 seniors. All told, over 700,000 people going without food. Congress said this should never happen. So we created a contingency fund. That fund has $5 billion in it. We created an interchange power so the president can actually use tariff funds to supplement that $5 billion. And here's the President of the United States last month acknowledging that that's the intent of Congress, that this funds exist, people will not go hungry. And now here's the President today saying, I am going to attack the health and welfare of America's most vulnerable families as a negotiating tactic. It reminds me of his strategy over immigration, saying we're going to separate children from their parents. We'll use children as a weapon. Well, here it is once again. And it's absolutely unacceptable. So, the President has the power to address this. And a group of attorney generals are saying, because it's the law, we're going to sue to say the President has to follow the law. Some 26 attorney generals are suing, saying, President, follow the law. We're saying, follow the law. His Republican colleagues, 11 in the Senate, are saying it matters that children not go hungry. You know, when children don't have food, they also don't learn. So it's not just an attack on their ability to have basic nutrition for a month. And who really, who in the United States says, I'm going to make sure children go hungry for a month as a political tactic? Who says that? Except this president in this time. It's unethical, it's immoral, it's illegal, and we're here to say, hell no, that Democrats and Republicans must join together and tell the president this cannot happen here, not in our nation, not against our children, not against our vulnerable families.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you, and thank you for calling this, Bernie. November 1st is just 3 days away. That's the day when SNAP benefits stop being added to EBT cards for 40 million Americans because Trump and MAGA Republicans refuse to use a $5.5 billion emergency fund to make sure families get to eat. Some of those families are already having to ration what's left on their cards because they fear nothing is coming on November 1st. That's the same day they have to pay rent. Maybe the same day they have to pay their electricity bill or refill grandma's prescription. It's 3 days until millions of families across the country wake up unable to stock the pantry. 3 days until thousands of military families and veterans will see their food aid disappear. It's the richest country in the world. When a CEO billionaire just got $1 trillion in tax breaks, Trump and his Republican allies in Congress will allow babies to go hungry. Trump just found $40 billion to bail out Argentina to get the new president elected, but he can't find enough to feed struggling American families. It is a national disgrace. In Massachusetts, 1.1 million people will struggle to put food on their tables starting Saturday. That's 1 in 6 people in our state. 1 in 3 SNAP recipients in Massachusetts is a child. At the Stop and Shop in Malden, 3 blocks from my house, right now it's $4.29 for a gallon of store brand whole milk. It's $7.55 for 1 pound of store-brand ground beef. It's $4.99 for a dozen store-brand large white eggs. And all a SNAP recipient gets is $6 to $7 a day. That's it. And they're going to cut that off. In New Bedford, it is half of all households are on SNAP. In Chelsea, 1 in 4 people receive SNAP benefits. And that's people who have real needs that have to be met for their families. So there's no reason a baby should cry and want a food. There's no reason a mother or father should have to experience the heartbreak of watching their daughter or son struggle to focus on homework because they missed a meal. Trump's cruel cuts are also straining the food banks. The pantries are already struggling to feed and meet the needs of hungry residents, a reality that was quite clear when I met with food bank leaders and anti-hunger organizers at Project Bread in East Boston on Friday. This moment isn't just an economic failure. This isn't just a civic failure. This is an utter moral failure for the Trump administration and MAGA Republicans. The president could choose to end this crisis today with just one vote. Republicans could restore health care and food assistance for millions of families across our country and reopen the government. Just one vote. But the president can use his emergency power to solve the health care problems that are going to be created by the food crisis. And he can do it right now, and he should do it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Sanders, and thanks to all of my colleagues to stand here with millions of Americans who are saying that our kids should not be used as bargaining chips in this ridiculous game that President Trump and Republicans are playing with the health and well-being of Americans. I want to just make 2 points. The first is that Donald Trump clearly has the authority to keep SNAP funding during this shutdown. He is just refusing to do it. His own USDA, as Senator Sanders just showed us, told the public that they had the authority. They put it up on the website, and now they've taken it down because they are cruelly using people as their bargaining chips. Congress specifically set aside an emergency pot of funding for situations like that. Like this, there's more than $5 billion in this fund that is available, so they have the money. And come next week, when roughly 40 million Americans and 440,000 Minnesotans can't buy groceries, that is going to be on Donald Trump and the Republicans. And here's the second point I want to make. This has real huge consequences for our communities and for our friends and families. On average, SNAP benefits are $6 a day. For most of the people who are using SNAP, they're folks that are seniors living on a fixed income. They're people living with disabilities, or they are really hardworking Americans, often working 2 jobs, and they still cannot afford, because of the way our economy is rigged to benefit the wealthiest among us, they still can't afford to buy groceries, even though they are working that hard. SNAP participation, it's important to understand who's getting SNAP. More likely, per capita, these are folks that are living in red districts, in rural counties. So this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is an everyone issue. And when SNAP benefits aren't paid, that single mom going to the grocery store with her EBT card, she doesn't have any money on that card, so she can't buy groceries. She goes to the food bank, and the food bank is empty because there is huge increased demand for food support. And everybody is hurt in rural communities when this is happening. So, as I thought I had seen everything, but I mean, seriously. Last summer, Donald Trump and Republicans paid for huge tax breaks for billionaires and for the wealthiest corporations by slashing health care and by slashing food benefits for working Americans. And now, what are they doing? They want to use hungry children as leverage to get Democrats to give up our fight to lower health insurance premiums. I mean, they're essentially telling America, you've got 2 choices. You can have dramatically higher insurance premiums, or millions of Minnesotans and millions of Americans can go hungry. And we all know that that is not the real choice. These are not our only choices. And Americans should not be forced by this president to choose between health care and food. So what needs to happen is really obvious. It's really clear. House Republicans need to come back to Washington, end their vacation, and get to work. We need to negotiate a deal. The president, who talks about the art of the deal, needs to get involved in the art of this deal to lower health care costs. and make sure that people have the food that they need.
Thanks, Senator Welch.
Sure. Thank you, Bernie, for calling this. Number one, this is not about the shutdown. You know, many of you who have asked us, are you getting pressure because now SNAP benefits are going to expire, and therefore shouldn't you reopen government? That is a fair question, but there's a clear answer. This has nothing to do with the shutdown. The law requires, and the funds are available to continue SNAP right now without any interruption. So that is a decision that the president is making on his own, to allow people to go hungry when he has the power to continue the SNAP benefits that folks desperately need. And it is desperate. I mean, the folks who rely on SNAP, $6 a day, and you can barely buy a pound of hamburger in Chelsea. But that is real. The other thing is a lot of the questions you ask are about the tactics. Who's doing what? How are you going to get them to negotiate? That's why I think stepping back and having some context, there really was a one big beautiful bill that really did provide incredible tax cuts for very wealthy people and corporations. There really was a big beautiful bill that cut food benefits and cut health care. And we are fighting for what Republican families and Democratic families need. And that's health care. Taking away the health care, the tax credits, and this applies to folks who are working, buying in the marketplace, means that they're not going to be able to afford it and they're going to lose it. You know, in Vermont, Bernie mentioned this, but it's astonishing when we see some Vermonters, because we have really high health care. A family who's making 60-year-old family, $82,000 a year, they can have a premium increase of $23,000. And then the folks we represent, Bernie, you're getting these letters, I am, and I know all of my colleagues are. There's panic among folks who need that $6 a day. And just a couple of people, a woman in St. Johnsbury, we will either be evicted or hungry. Which would you choose? A woman in Essex, without SNAP, I will not be able to eat or get through the month. The situation is out of control. A Vermonter in Brattleboro, I am terrified to hear I'll likely have no grocery money next month. Now, the heartbreak for me about this is not about the politics of who's on first, who's winning, who's got the right move. The politics of this are, do we all want to meet the obligations that we have to the people we represent? And Republican families, Republican farmers, Republican small businesses, as well as their Democratic counterparts, are all the ones who are going to suffer if we don't act. It's totally inexcusable, and it's completely unnecessary.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Bernie. Listen, I think we have to understand that Donald Trump and Republicans have one priority and one priority only. That is the enrichment of their billionaire and corporate friends at the expense of everyone else. The big beautiful bill is a simple enterprise, the most massive transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to the rich and affluent in the history of the country. Included in that big beautiful bill is a massive cut to nutrition benefits. And so the tactics they are using today are in service of maintaining their one single priority, the tax cuts that they were able to gift to the very wealthy and the very powerful. The richest families in this country in the big beautiful bill got a tax cut of $270,000. And so it shouldn't surprise anyone how outrageous these tactics are. One is to tell House Republicans to not show up for work, right? I know you guys have to write a new story every day, but there's really only one story, which is that the House Republicans have been AWOL from their jobs for the entirety of the shutdown because it's easier to protect your tax cuts for the wealthy if you don't even require your employees to show up on the job. It is extraordinary to put families in this country through the horrific, mind-altering pain of knowing that your children are going to go to bed hungry at night. But it's in service of protecting the tax cuts for the wealthy. As Tina said, what they believe is that they can put people through such horrifying pain in this country that Democrats will agree to a budget that allows for those tax cuts to continue and spreads even more pain amongst people through the evisceration of our healthcare system. So we are here today talking about this illegal decision that the president has made to not spend these contingency funds because only one thing matters to him: preserving those tax cuts. We are here as the only body showing up for work today because only one thing matters to Donald Trump: preserving those tax cuts. No president in the history of this country has ignored that law, has during a period of shutdown refused to spend the contingency funds, because no president prior to this one was so myopic about helping only one small segment of people in this country, the very rich and powerful, that they were willing to do such enormous, unconscionable damage to the most vulnerable families in this country as a tactic to try to make sure that their help for the powerful is maintained.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernie. We know that Donald Trump and Republicans here in Congress and all their billionaire buddies don't care about slashing and now terminating food assistance programs for 40 million Americans, including 16 million kids. How can we say that with confidence? Because, as my colleague said, they showed us who they were in what they called the Big Beautiful Bill. It was beautiful if you're a billionaire. For everybody else, it sucked. And one of the things they did was cut food assistance programs for almost $200 billion to help finance those tax cuts for their billionaire buddies. That was a choice. It was an intentional, deliberate choice. Tax breaks for billionaires at the expense of kids and other on food and nutrition programs. And what they're doing right now is also a deliberate choice. They are using this Trump shutdown to inflict unnecessary pain on the American people. We've seen this already in the context of federal employees, where they've been illegally firing federal employees. Just within the last 48 hours, a federal judge said that they were imposing political retribution on federal employees. We know what Russ Vought told the country he wanted to do. He said he wanted to impose trauma on federal employees. And now what they're doing is using these cuts to food and nutrition programs to impose trauma on all of the American people. And we know it's deliberate because, as my colleagues have pointed out repeatedly, this statement was on the Department of Agriculture website just within the last few weeks. They know what congressional intent is. They know they've got the money, and they are choosing not to use it for this purpose. So this is a sadistic policy being imposed by Russ Vought and Donald Trump and Republicans, depriving 40 million Americans of food, nutrition assistance to keep paying for their billionaire buddies' tax cuts. I looked up in Webster's the definition of sadism, and the definition is to delight in cruelty. That's really sick. But that's exactly what Donald Trump and Russ Vought and Republicans are doing. They're delighting in cruelty, and they're using 40 million Americans and 16 million of them kids for their perverse purposes at this moment. Our message is pretty simple. You don't have to do it. In fact, the law says you should spend the money to make sure that we feed hungry Americans. So don't do it, and join us, as we've done 7 times now, to vote to reopen the government without giving Donald Trump and Russ Vought a blank check, and also to bring down health care costs that are going through the roof. That's our message.
Senator Warren.
Thank you. Excuse me. For the first time in American history, a president of the United States is shutting down access to food for millions of Americans. Donald Trump has made the decision to let people across this country go hungry. Trump is telling 15 million hungry children, eat dirt. Trump is telling 1 million hungry vets, eat dirt. Trump is telling 8 million seniors who are hungry, eat dirt. That is how much Donald Trump cares about the children, the veterans, the seniors, the people of this country. Look, Donald Trump knows how to round up money. He's managed to round up money for a gold-encrusted ballroom to replace the East Wing of the White House. He has managed to round up $40 billion for Argentina, but he can't manage to round up 1 nickel for hungry children in this country. This is a manufactured crisis. Donald Trump and the Republicans, part one, decided to cut benefits for those who are hungry in the big, beautiful bill. Part two is the government shutdown. Donald Trump and the Republicans would rather shut down government than help Americans afford their health care. And part three is Donald Trump and the Republicans ignore current law, ignore the $6 billion already sitting in reserve in order to deny hungry people access to the food they need. So, while Donald Trump is dreaming of well-done steaks with ketchup to be eaten in his gold-encrusted ballroom, little kids will go hungry. I am proud to be here with the Democrats who are fighting back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, right here. Yeah. Tell us where you're from.
I'm Gabe Hawkins. I'm from the Dole News Service. This is for any of the senators, but do you think that the unpopularity of SNAP benefits being...
This is the recap with KU.